Hey there folks. So in our last video we set up a tile map, and you can see that here. I've just basically put some stuff in the ground, and when I press play my character's still walking on that floor. So if I press F8 just to show you, you can see my character's still there just walking along on that floor. So how do I go about now replacing all of the things that already exist here? And one of the first things that I really want you to think about is what is the value, the depth value that your level is going to be playable from. That's really the most important question that we have right now. So when I select this player start, one of the things you'll notice is there's a Z value, because obviously it's been pulled up away from the floor. It's at 0 in terms of the X, and that's perfectly fine, but it doesn't really matter. When we move this and say where do we start with our level, the X value, that's just determining how far along we are. And if we wanted to start up here, great, that's just the Z value changing, and that's where we're going to be appearing as a player. So this kind of Z and X, these define the playable barriers. But the Y value, that is our depth. This is that green value here, and I've got this set to 0. And that means that what I'm going to basically work on now is the idea that 0 is my playable depth. Anything that comes this way, so you can see anything that increases from 0 goes into the foreground, and anything that goes negative goes into my background. Anything that moves further back from my character. So with this tile sheet, what I can do is I can say, well, let's put his depth at 0. And how's that going to work? Well, my character is glitching and fighting and trying to exist on both of those. And one of the things that you'll notice here is that he's not actually walking on it. Yeah, if I were to take away this floor, let's do the really big test with this. If I take that away and look at where my character starts, I want this tile map here to be the thing that my character steps upon and drops down onto at the start. So let's press play, and he falls through the floor. Even though, if we go and have a look and just press F to just snap back to it, even though he's set to walk on that, even though they're both at the same depth, and the reason for that is our tile map has no collisions assigned to it. Now you might come over here and you might look at it and say, well, the layer collides. This is an option that we have in our tile map. If the layer collides, why is it not colliding? And that is because what we need to do is we need to go into our tile sets, and for each of these individual tiles that we have here, we need to start defining which ones of them have a collision on them. So how do we actually do that? What I'm going to show you is the basics, and this is the very quick, simple one that we're going to do for most of these tiles. And then we can go in and we can add some custom ones where necessary. So first of all, select a tile, and you can see obviously my tiles, they're settling up to 16 by 16, which covers the cube here. And if I go up to the top and go add box, it adds a box that basically fits that tile size. Yeah, so if I go over to, for example, this door, this door, this door, this door, I could go in each of these and I could add boxes. Now, how am I meant to know which ones of these I've already done? Yeah, it's going to be an absolute pain to know that. So what we need to do is go over to the left-hand side where it says colliding tiles and tick that on. And what it will show you is it will show you which tiles in your grid have a collision assigned to them. Now, the key thing here is it shows you which ones have a collision. It doesn't show you necessarily which ones have what type of collision. So I could go through all of these. I'm just going to keep on doing this while I'm talking. I can go through each one of these and just adding the collisions to them, saying that these here are all going to be, collidable, blockable elements. These bits are going to be repeatable middle sections. These bits down the bottom might be end sections. But what about this? This one here, do I want that one to have a complete box around it? Probably not. So the options I've got here, I can either edit the individual ones that are already there. So for example, I might take and click on an individual point and I can move it around. You see there is a bit of a snapping to it, and you can change the snapping up here. So I could change that to try and match it up, and you can move this down a little bit. It's not perfect, and what I would advise you to do is not go into too precise. Keep this nice and simple, keep this nice and easy. You don't need every single tile having a completely unique shape to it, especially if you've got something like flat bottomed collisions on your character. Do we need to have every single one of these be the same? Well, test it out. Get your character walking up and down these slopes. Does this need to have my character walk up on it? If so, maybe I need to match it up. And so in this instance, do I go to 1? And you can see it's on a per pixel basis. I map it up to there, And does this one go and map to there? Maybe. Or do I press delete and just completely remove it? If I press delete and completely remove it, you'll see that the rest of the stuff will update and adapt based on that. Now, again, what's the best you can get? It's either going to be some pixels don't or some do. And again, you're not going to see this on some characters. They're going to have that kind of curved collision, which means they're going to sit and stand on a lot of this, and we won't even notice. But with that done, what you'll notice over on the left-hand side is that that is still a colliding tile. So in terms of colliding tile, it shows as a square. It shows as a colliding tile, but it doesn't actually define what type of collision has been assigned to it. I can do the same one here. I can add polygon, and the add polygon, what this one does is it allows me to manually draw. So each click draws the collision, and when I go over the original starting one, I can close. Again, it's fine, but maybe think about, is it easier to just take a corner and go, it is a triangle? Yeah, add a box, add a triangle. Do you need your artist to try and get things as close and as uniform as possible? Or when you're playing, do you notice the gaps that are in here? Either way, play around with those and see what works. Now, notice I'm not putting any collision onto this grey one here. And the reason for that is I'm going to use that as my background. Now, it's not going to be the greatest because obviously it's going to be appearing on the same level as my character. But one of the things that I will be able to do is start thinking about now adding different layers and depth, so that things that don't have a collision could be appearing behind my character, whereas things that do have a collision could obviously be the things they walk on. So look through your tile sets and think, what is actual kind of traversable gameplay elements that my character walks and traverses on? And you can see here I'm pretty much done with that. All of the big blocks, the things that make my level, I've added a collision to. Does this one need a little corner? Probably not. So let's go back into our tile map and test this out now. We can see that we've got layer collides, and we press play. Now he's dropping all the way through. So what do we need to actually think about here? Maybe on our tile map, the next thing we might want to have a look at is what kind of collision thickness is actually being applied to this. So I could go in here and say 150. What does that actually do to this? Well, let's go find our tile map, press F, snap it up, and you won't see this detail immediately, but if we were to go to this kind of like show and have a look at the options that are in here, you could go show collision, and can you see how the tiles that have a collision, we can view that they are now much wider. And straight away, I've now got a playable space that my player can walk along. Now, they're fighting. Yeah, the background one, the grey one, and the character are both on the exact same depth value, so they're fighting to render over the top of each other. So let's fix that with one last little fix on this one. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into this tile map. I'm going to erase all of this background stuff out, and let's make this a lovely little background playable area. So we're going to start with what is my gameplay, my foreground, my midground, and then we're going to add a background as well. So layer 1, I like to rename my layers. Let's call this one gameplay. That's our base layer. That's going to be our 0. And then I'm going to add a new layer. So you can see here, this little kind of plus with a green arrow. What it does is it says add a new layer above the existing one. You can't really randomly add them anywhere in. You have to always add it above a selected one, but then you can move that one down. So now with that selected, I'm going to rename that one, and we'll go with background. Now with the background one selected, what I can do is I could hide the gameplay one, and I can look at the background one, and I could say, well, let's fill this in with that background. Yeah, I could even go as far as adding all sorts of weird and wonderful kind of details and elements on top of this. I could go into my gameplay layer, and you can see I can add things on top. So maybe in here I could paint in. Probably don't want to go on the fill. Let's go on the painting layer. There we go. Go on the painting layer, and we could paint these in. There you go. Now you can see that that obviously gets rid of the grey. Yeah, this has that transparency, so it gets rid of the grey. And this is where it might be, again, useful for having that kind of element of, well, do I have background and have background detail? So yes, this one is my background layer, but this one is my background detail layer. These are things that exist over the top of my background, and I could expand these out. I can do all sorts of weird and wonderful things with this. And this is my gameplay layer. Okay, so let's have a look at this now when it's in the world. What we should see now is that we've got 3 small planes. Each one of those planes has been created to represent each of the individual layers that we have. Now, if I'm looking at this and thinking about which one of them exists, I'm going to have to, just for a moment, look at this and think, well, my character exists at 0. My character is appearing on the first top layer. So every layer that I add is being pushed back at the moment from there. What about if I added another layer above this one? And this one was going to be, let's go with foreground. So I'm just going to rename this one. We'll go with FG for foreground. And what have I got here? Well, I've got these rocky bits. Yeah, I can take these rocks and I can put some of those into my level. And maybe a couple of these over there. I can also flip these over, so I could go with the opposite way. And the reason I'm doing that is just so that you can see that that has now added these foreground elements. Now, they're great, but my tile map registers its position as 0, which means that this, the gameplay layer, has been moved back a bit. So one of the things I want you to look at here is actually the separation per layer. The separation per layer is the gap that happens between each of these physically in space. And there's a big consideration here, whether you're using perspective or orthographic. So one of the things I'm just going to do here is I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to say, actually, this, I want to move it 4. And the reason for that is now this one, the one that's actually kind of my, my walkable area, that one's appearing on the gameplay space. Yeah, you can see there. And these ones are 4 in front because I've moved so that the one that was at 0, which is the top layer, I've moved it 4 forward. And if we press play, you can see that my character is now appearing behind that. And it's not too bad. Yeah, I've got an element of perspective. Can you see in the corners, there's things that are kind of moving at different speeds and paces. What about if we go into here and we increase that separation? Let's go with 25. Now, 25, what we're going to see now is each one of those has been pushed apart from each other. And what was 4 in terms of my tile map, now actually 4 exists in this big gap here, which might not be a problem because, look at this big collision box I added. I'm going to have my character walking along this collision box, but my character doesn't exist on 0, 0, 0 in terms of the origins of anything anymore. It especially doesn't exist on 0 of the depth. So here, this might be where you want to say, well, actually, let's set that to be whatever my layer depth is. And this would be, for every single one of these, move things forward. That's my gameplay layer. Times it by however many layers are above and the spacing. So there we go. Now look at this. As we move, the perspective is going to be way more pronounced. We're going to have things that are going to start moving at different paces from each other. You can see down at the bottom bits that are being revealed because they move at different paces. And that's just literally for the fact that the depth is being picked up by that perspective camera. If I were to go to my Widow and go to the actual kind of Widow demo over here, let's go to the spring arm camera and we'll change that to orthographic. Maybe 1024. Let's have a look, play around with that value, see what works nicely for us. Yeah, that's not too bad. We will have to do some fixing for the fact that there's stuff in the way. But now, because we're viewing this through the orthographic camera, everything is completely flat. So it doesn't matter anymore how much layer depth, because even if the layers are hundreds and hundreds of units away from each other, it's being rendered out completely flat by this camera. Okay, so I've got at least a starting point to this level. I've got a foreground, background, midground. I have got this kind of walkable surface that I'm walking over. And the other thing that we should be able to do is just take all of this kind of camera lighting based stuff that was there and get rid of that. And now, because we don't have all the atmosphere stuff in there, all of our sprites are set to unlit. So our sprites are just rendering out themselves based on the emissive properties of a sprite material. If you wanted to have a lit one, then you'll have to start thinking about having individual lights that are in there. Go and have a look at something like Siege and the Sandfox, where the sprites have a light on them. But for this, with this kind of orthographic view, now you can see that I can start actually walking around between these. And one of the things I can also do is I could take lots of these tile map levels. So take another tile map level, let's put it in. You know, how far do I want it to have? Well, 25 is an easy one to remember, and probably want to have a much higher snap than this because one's just a bit too tight of a snap. But you can see I can put that, move them next to each other, and there's no reason to think of this as, you know, one specific tile map is one specific level, because what we can do is, as long as they meet up with each other and as long as they've both got collisions, yeah, I can just go from one to the other. And this is all you're going to be doing. You're just going to be planning out your levels as lots of small kind of modular pieces that we can put together to make bits of levels, and we can make bigger bigger playable levels out of those. Now in the future we're going to come back, we're going to go through a whole bunch of these different options. We're going to change some of the options for the different layers, but that should give you everything you need just for now to get a basic tile set into your level, make a tile map out of it, make it collidable, and then obviously start playing your level in that kind of 2D mode that we've been working towards the whole time. Thanks for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this video, then please consider subscribing to access more of my Unreal Engine content.